and Charlotte Mason talk about spreading the feast and mother culture. Welcome to the diner, where we serve up culture from a short order kitchen. Step up to the counter and let us serve you a slice of mental pie. Not a feast, just a snack. A deep thought to chew on from a big, meaty book. It'll go good with a cup of coffee. Then you get your refreshed self back to the fray with a few new beautiful thoughts to think. It's Season 1, and the Blue Plate Special is Dr. Timothy Petitsis, The Ethics of Beauty. You know, that huge, intimidating popular theology book that you wish you had time to read? Well, have a couple bites of it with us and join the conversation.
Welcome back to the diner. I am Lisa Rose, and I'm here with my co-author Laura E. Wolf. And today we are going to talk about fasting, which is a good topic to bring up since when this releases, we will be in the middle of Lent, or having started Lent anyway. And fasting comes up all the time in relation to Lent. So Laura, why don't you share the quote that we are going to be using as our jumping off point today?
Okay, Dr. Petitsis says in Ethics of Beauty, fasting is how we purify Eros, while feasting is how we intensify it. The two only make sense together. And fasting and feasting both involve the body, showing that the spiritual life involves the total human person. Finally, fasting and feasting, although they are the heart of this first stage of spiritual life because they help us to develop chastity, are also this good preparation to serve our sister or brother.
So I love that part where it says fasting is how we purify Eros, while feasting is how we intensify it. Both of them are about increasing our desire for Christ. It's two sides of the same coin. Fasting is purgatory, not in the sense of the place, but in the sense that it purges us. So it gives us a chance to cleanse our palates, in a sense, so that we can truly appreciate the feast. If we feast all the time, eventually it becomes just mundane. It's like an ordinary thing, just constant stuffing your face is, eventually you get tired of it. But by fasting, we anticipate the feast. We look forward to it. We prepare for it because we're making room within ourselves for the joy of the feast. So, like, for example, like Thanksgiving dinner, a lot of us, I know I personally and my husband, we don't eat before Thanksgiving dinner. Like, we try not to eat most of the day because we're really excited about that big feast. It happens once a year. We want that food and we want to enjoy every bite, and we don't want to be full when we come to that table. We want to be hungry because we want to be able to feast. And so it's the same thing like with asceticism, with the spiritual fasting. Like, we're fasting from food, we're fasting physically, but it's not divorced from the spiritual side. We couple that physical practice with fasting from sin. And we're doing this in order to make room for Christ. And so we are purifying our Eros for him.
It gets mentioned a lot during Lent every year, but I think it's one of the most important things to repeat. We need to hear it over and over and over again, that although fasting is about food, it's not about food, right? The fasting from food is the gateway to the greater context with everything. It's the beginning because, honestly, if we can't control what we're eating, we really can't control anything else that's coming in or out of our mouths. So we have to start somewhere. So in a sense, it is about the food. But then ultimately, one of my priests has often said that fasting without prayer is the devil's fast. Have you heard this before?
Yeah, I've heard that. Mm-hmm.
Because even the demons don't eat, and they also don't pray. So this sense of this purification of our Eros, it's not just the food fasting that is purifying our desire. Although, like you said, it is actually purifying our physical act of eating too. I mean, if you don't eat, then you're able to enjoy it more. But the physical act, you know what? I just have this picture of myself on a Wednesday night at pre-sanctified liturgy, and how, do you ever get the sense during pre-sanctified liturgy how simple everything is, really? Do you know what I mean by that sense?
Mm-hmm.
There's such a clarity that comes in those quiet services, and I think that's the spirit of the fast entirely. I think that's exactly what he's talking about here when he's talking about that purification. Everything becomes clearer for us to see the reality.
Yeah. In Way of the Ascetics, he talks about the clarity that comes from fasting. This is Way of the Ascetics by Tito Colliander. He talks about fasting, purifying. I'll have to see if I can find the quote. And if I do, I will share it, in the notes for this episode.
So what about this then, Lisa? Because, you and I have both been mothers for a long time. What do we say to the moms who are either nursing or pregnant and can't fast, or have lots of little kids who literally will only eat chicken nuggets?
Oh, don't you love that? Like, you just don't even get to decide what your kids like. They just choose, and you may not have never even given them chicken nuggets, but somebody does. Right. And then they're like, that's all I want. I don't like that, but I will have chicken nuggets.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, the thing is, and there's also the advice, pregnant and nursing mothers really shouldn't be fasting to the full extent of the fast. They need to nourish their bodies so that they can nourish their children's bodies. But this is one of the ways in which fasting, sometimes it is a fast when you eat something that's not fasting food. And it sounds weird to say that, but you may want to fast.
Say that again, because it's brilliant.
So, sometimes it is a fast when you eat food that's not fasting food. Because a lot of times we want to do everything perfectly. We want to be able to check the boxes and say, yes, I fasted from meat, I fasted from dairy, I fasted from fish, I fasted from oil, I fasted from wine. All, it would be great if we could do that. I have never done a complete fast like that. Maybe once in a while I'll have one meal, that's that. But most of the time, through the 40 days, no, that doesn't happen. But the thing is, when we're fasting with our children, and number one, even if we just fast from one thing, we can teach them to give up this one thing and still eat what they want, the other things that they want, that's fine. But, we could choose one thing. But the other thing is that it's okay to be imperfect, because we're also teaching them that it's really not about checking the boxes of the right food or the wrong food. And it's not about reading the ingredients on the label. And it's not about, who did it right and who didn't. You may have two people at the same table, and one of them puts a little cheese on their dish, and the other one is like, oh, you put cheese on your, that's missing the point. If you look at somebody else and you say, hey, they're not fasting, then you're just missing the point of your own fast. You're messing yourself up. I have this little chalkboard where we wrote this saying called, keep your eyes on your own plate.
I think this is something that's very confusing for converts, because when converts come to the church, they're like, oh, fasting. Yeah, I want to do that. I want to get the spiritual benefits. And they come into this and we want to talk hey, somebody talk to me about fasting. And then, after you've been Orthodox for a while, you're like, oh, now I understand why nobody talks about fasting. So, like everything else, and I feel remiss if we didn't say this. If you're listening to this and you have questions about how you should fast, you need to be talking to your parish priest, your spiritual father, and you need to be in a physical church. There's no other way to do Orthodoxy than being in a physical church with a parish priest and a community of believers around you. But aside from that, it is also true that there are a lot of lessons about fasting, especially in a family context, that look a lot different from Orthodox literature, because Orthodox literature over the centuries has been written for an audience of monastics, right? It's not primarily written for the mom with 3 kids under 5 and they only want to eat chicken nuggets and you're nursing a baby. It's that's not a context that a Byzantine monastic would resonate with at all.
So we have to remember, we have to continually bring ourselves back to the purpose of fasting. Why am I doing this? What purpose is it serving? Because fasting is a tool. It doesn't make you holy, but it's a tool to help you form and maintain a relationship with Christ. It's not at all about being this perfect Christian, this perfect Orthodox Christian who's got all the boxes checked. Like I said, I keep saying that phrase this time, but it's, that's what comes to my mind when I think like, okay, we're just going to do it all right. And it's not about that at all. It's about relationship. And sometimes in relationships, things don't look the way you expect because you're dealing with another person. In this case, we're talking about being with Christ, and we bring to him ourselves as best we can. And sometimes we can't keep the food fast perfectly, but what we can do is turn to him in every, like with every meal, with every crying kid, with every kid that's, interrupting what we're doing or all of that. And we can give it to him and say, Lord, what do you want me to do with this? Let me offer this back to you.
Sometimes I think it's as simple as the meat of the fast is fasting from getting our own way. And sometimes, we think, oh, I'd be a perfect faster at following all the dietary guidelines if I could just have my own way.
Uh-huh.
But the greater teaching moment for all of us all the time, and we have in this modern world, I feel like we suffer this all the time because it's so easy for us to get what we want in so many contexts that we forget how getting what we want is not the point of this life at all.
Yeah.
So on the flip side, as we're purifying our Eros for Christ, we're also getting ready to intensify our Eros for Christ on the Feast of Feasts on Pascha, right? So when we feast, we're going to enjoy and delight in this feast. And I'm already looking forward to Pascha.
Oh, yeah. There's an anticipation there that is so much more intense, so much better than the Thanksgiving anticipation. Like this is just way beyond anything. And there's a real joy in it. I'm thankful that all of my children love Pascha as like the best time of the year because it's not about us. It's about, the resurrection. And that's so different than like say Christmas, for example, right? Christmas is like, oh, the presents, at least for kids. When you have kids, that's what it's about. But with Pascha, we really see, the joy of the feast as this transcendent, transfigured kind of joy. It's not the same as an earthly kind of joy.
Yeah, you said that to me a couple years ago, and it really helped me as someone who did not grow up Orthodox, because I always wanted to, well, how can I make Pascha as big of a celebration as Christmas is? And I always felt that there was a disconnect between the two. And you said to me a few years ago, you said, you're missing the point. Christmas is an earthly feast. It's supposed to be big and earthly and feasting and gifts and all these wonderful things about our presence here on earth. And Pascha is the heavenly feast. It's the spiritual feast. It's entirely different. The context is entirely different.
Right. Because Christmas is the incarnation, the coming in the flesh of Christ. So he's taking on that flesh, and the things we are celebrating, it's right for them to have like an earthly tenor. But with Pascha, it's now we've transcended that. Christ is risen.
Well, with that in mind, let's leave everybody with a couple questions this week. Think about fasting as purifying Eros and feasting as intensify it. Think about our own power of Eros, which is our desiring power. So think about when we get what we want. Do we often get what we want? And how can not getting what we want now help us to want the right things?
Yeah. How does it shape our desires and straighten them out and put them on the right things? Yes. So with that in mind, please leave your comments in the comments below, and we will see you next time.